Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Global Focus by Hari Prakash Sinha, where we delve into the stories that shape our world. I am Hari Prakash Sinha, your host, and today we are going to explore one of the most turbulent nights in South Korea's recent history, a night of chaos that left an indelible mark on its society. We are honored to have with us Dr. Adityanjee. Dr. Adityanjee is the president of Council for Strategic Affairs. He brings unique insight and first-hand knowledge of the events and their aftermath. Dr. Adityanjee, we are thrilled to have you join us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me on your Global Focus platform, and I am happy to be here to discuss the South Korean democracy crisis.
Yes, sir. So, sir, just directly let come to the topic. We have seen recently South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol shocked the country and declared martial law on Tuesday night, but backtracked hours after lawmakers defied security forces to vote against his declaration, and thousands of protesters took to the streets. So we are going to discuss this uh, situation that occurred a few days back in South Korea. So what are the chain of events that led to this situation? So what is your idea, sir?
So, I think for the audience, it's important to realize that current president of South Korea was elected in 2022,
I see.
and it was a highly contested elections, very narrow election,
Right.
and the president won by very slender majority against the opposition candidate. He belongs to a conservative party called PPP, People's Power Party,
I see.
and the opposition party is DPK, Democratic Party of Korea, which is more liberal, more left wing. PPP is more conservative party.
I see.
So the other thing is that in April of this year, there were National Assembly elections held, and the opposition actually has majority in the National Assembly. So
Yeah.
out of 300 seats in South Korea's National Assembly, the opposition parties have 192 seats. And it's not just one party, there are multiple parties there. And PPP, the Conservative Party of President uh, Suk, has only 108 seats. So it's a divided government. And as a matter of fact, the popularity in opinion polls for the current president has been hovering in 20s, not very high. So whenever there is a divided government, there is some friction between the legislative wing versus the executive wing.
Yeah.
And it seems that the legislative wing, the opposition party was trying to bring some impeachment notices against certain functionaries in the executive branch. The Constitution of Korea does allow for martial law, but once the martial law is declared, it has to be ratified by the assembly.
Oh.
And the Constitution also demands that prior to declaring martial law, the president has to have, quote unquote, a consultation with the cabinet. But it does not say that it has to be approved by cabinet.
Okay.
So it appears that the decision to impose martial law was hastily taken by president along with that former defense minister who was his high school junior mate, Kim.
Oh.
Something cooked between these two, and they arranged for sudden imposition of martial law because they were concerned that some impeachment notices would be brought. Uh, and on Tuesday night, with some preparation, because it appears that the former defense minister had called the army commanders and all
Mhm.
and mobilized the armed forces to go to the National Assembly and possibly ask to arrest some of the lawmakers, etc., etc. And the armed forces did go to National Assembly, try to put barricades, but around 195 members of the National Assembly managed to get into the National Assembly, and within a couple of hours of the martial law being declared,
Yeah.
the National Assembly said this is not constitutional, we are not ratifying it. So then the president was forced to withdraw the martial law, and the casualty of this whole saga became the former defense minister Kim,
Mhm.
who actually took the responsibility for it and resigned. So then the president of South Korea appointed a new defense minister who was a former military person, South Korean ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He was made the defense minister. But there were rumblings against the president. People came in the streets, but there were also counter demonstrations from conservative party people, including some students who also made counter demonstrations. South Korean democracy is very, very noisy. Let's be very clear about it.
There is a very natural question.
Hmm.
What do you think about the ability and capability of the South Korean president?
So situation has moved on, and what happened that after this happened, President Yoon Suk Yeol declared the martial law, withdrew the martial law.
Hmm.
After the, and the army had to be removed from the National Assembly and from the capital. The opposition party, the DPK, became very active, and they brought actually impeachment motions against four members of the government, including the president Yoon Suk Yeol. They also voted on a motion to adopt a special council against the First Lady of Korea, that is the wife of President Yoon Suk Yeol. And there were allegations of financial corruption, etc., etc. Now, I have to clarify that when the martial law was declared by President Yoon, some of his own party members were very, very hesitant. They were reticent, they didn't want to support it, they felt dragged into the process. In fact, the prime minister and deputy prime minister initially supported, then they were not in favor of it. Uh, so their rationale was that declaring martial law will have economic consequences and geopolitical consequences. Economic consequences would be that the South Korean currency will fall and the investor confidence will go away. So the economy will go into tailspin. And of course, there will be international repercussions because this was done suddenly without consulting anyone. In fact, very close allies of South Korea, like United States, did not know that South Korean president was going to impose martial law. So already it was a contested decision. And once the martial law was withdrawn, the prime minister did say that this was a wrong step, it should not have been taken, and the Prime Minister say that the position of President Yoon has become untenable. So there are divisions in his own party. The motion to appoint a special counsel to investigate the First Lady did not pass in the National Assembly. So that was one thing. Once that happened, in the National Assembly, the legislators or the members of the parliament belonging to the to the president's party, which is the Conservative Party, PPP, People's Power Party, they staged a walkout. And they staged a walkout, but at that time, a motion to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol was already under consideration. And I think it was a parliamentary maneuver so that the motion to impeach the president does not pass. I already told you that in 300 member National Assembly, 192 belonged to opposition parties, and all of them voted actually to impeach President Yoon. Okay. Only one member of the conservative PPP stayed behind. Rest of them walked out. So from 192, it becomes 193. This legislature stayed in and voted to impeach the president. And then the Speaker of the National Assembly made a lot of, sort of exhortations to the members of PPP to come back and vote. Only two members came back. So out of 108 members of Conservative People's Power Party, only 3 members returned to the parliament and voted to impeach the president. But that brings the number to only 195. You require a supermajority of 200 out of 300 to impeach the president. The Speaker of the Assembly initially said that he will not close the vote, he will keep an open session till Sunday. But ultimately, he decided to close the session and said the impeachment motion is defeated. Now, while this saga was being carried out, the president, Yoon, went on a televised address to the nation and formally apologized for imposing martial law. There was a lot of chatter that although he has withdrawn the martial law this time, he might actually do again for the second time at a later stage.
Okay.
So he also gave a statement that there will not be any second martial law. He said that he is very sorry that he did it and he takes full legal responsibility for it and he'll face the consequences. He also gave a statement that, the martial law was declared out of desperation because of anti-state activities of some of the opposition politicians. And in South Korea, when you say anti-state, it is like, siding with communist North Korea. North Korea and South Korea are sworn enemies, and the woke elements and the liberal elements of the South Korean society have advocated for closer ties with North Korea and, not having kind of US armed forces stationed in that country and, try to ease relationship. So it's a very complex situation, and he had justified on the basis of, the communist forces sabotaging the state of North Korea. So anti-national forces will take prominence, and idea was to quote unquote tackle them. So he apologized for it and said that there will never be a second martial law declaration. But his own party's leadership has said that president's position has become untenable. President Yoon, even if he's not impeached, he may have to resign at some point in time.
Moving to the next question, what are the national implications of this incident?
So, as I said, that there is, failed impeachment process.
Yeah.
Having said that, his reputation has been damaged and dented.
Yeah.
His own party's leader is saying that his position has become untenable and at some point in time he may have to resign. I think if he resigns, then the prime minister will become the interim president while elections are being held and all that sort of thing. So this brings a phase of uncertainty in the national political situation in South Korea. I may say that this is not the first time they have tried to impeach a president. In 2016, South Korea had impeached the first female president, Park Geun-hye, who herself was daughter of a former president who had been assassinated 20, 30 years ago. So she was impeached on the grounds that she had taken bribes, and her impeachment was carried out. She was successfully impeached, and South Korea's Supreme Court actually ratified the impeachment by 8-1 vote. And she was actually sent to prison. She spent some time in prison, and the next president actually pardoned her. So she was released after maybe 11 months of prison stay. So she was disgraced. And also in 2004, President Moon was impeached temporarily for a period of 2 months till the impeachment was reversed by the Supreme Court. So South Korean politics is very volatile. Uh, yes, president's declaration of martial law created a chain of events, and instead of helping him, it has damaged his credibility. He had to apologize on television, and his own party has, they didn't want him to be impeached, but issue is that they will not let him continue his rest of the term, and most likely after a few days, he may be forced to resign.
So similarly, what will be the international implication of this incident?
Nothing much, as I said that the closest ally they have is United States.
Mhm.
United States was caught off guard, so that is one thing.
Okay.
Temporarily, it may give a boost to North Korean King Jong-un,
Mm.
but I don't see any major international repercussions. Yes, it may affect the South Korean economy and the South Korean, you know, analysts and political pundits are already taking the talking about that it was the
Yeah.
economic issues that reversed the decision because everyone was concerned about economic downturn, South Korean currency going into a free fall, lack of investor confidence, and capital flight from South Korea. Now, will that happen after martial law has been declared illegal or withdrawn, and after the president has been unsuccessfully impeached? We have yet to see.
So could this incident set a dangerous precedent for other democracies in the region, like Japan or Taiwan, that face similar external and internal pressures?
I don't think so because they are different countries. Now, you mentioned Taiwan and Japan.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Japan first.
Yeah.
Since end of World War II, the new Japanese constitution, which was essentially dictated by U.S. General, uh, who was stationed there, and dictated the new constitution, which is a pacifist constitution. There has not been any declaration of martial law in Japan. It has been a democratic country ruled by most of the time since that time by LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, which is more like a coalition. The only time Japan had a military prime minister was General Hideki Tojo during Second World War. Japan has continuity of government in the form of monarchy, and everyone respects and reveres the Japanese monarchy. So even during Second World War, when General Tojo was the prime minister, a military prime minister, he still had to bow to the emperor, and every decision was taken in the name of the emperor. So, under the current situation, the chances of declaration of martial law in Japan is not zero, but in negative. Japan is a functional democracy with its all warts and deficiencies, but I don't think that will ever happen because of the pacifist constitution, change in thinking, Japanese people focusing more on, commercial and economic issues rather than military issues. So we can safely say that that's a very, very hypothetical scenario that there will be martial law in Japan because of the same thing. Unless China declares a war on Japan, I don't see anything happening.
What about Taiwan?
Taiwan is slightly different situation. In Taiwan, there was a continuous martial law for 38 years from when the Kuomintang government or the nationalist government in mainland China was defeated on the mainland by PLA forces and they were forced to flee the mainland. They took refuge in the Taiwan island. And since that time, there was martial law declared by Kuomintang government of Chiang Kai-shek. Now, this martial law lasted till 1987, July of 1987. After that, there has been democratic governments in Taiwan, and pretty much democracy has flourished. Now, Taiwan is under direct threat from PLA, from CPC, and Xi Jinping, who has said that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when there is reunification. And there are chatters that Xi Jinping will try to annex Taiwan by 2027. So Taiwan is in a different category. Whether there is martial law or not may depend upon Chinese aggression. But short of Chinese aggression, Taiwan has also inbuilt a democracy that is very vibrant and flourishing.
I see.
And the current president was actually elected in January of this year. He's a physician, uh, and actually there is again a divided government actually because the National Assembly is controlled by the opposition.
Mm.
So Taiwan although has history of martial law for 38 years under Kuomintang government, at this point in time, it's a vibrant democracy and everything will depend if China starts attacking or puts a blockade or something like that.
So, coming to my final question, how should South Korea rebuild its public trust after the chaotic episode, and what lessons can other democracies learn from it?
Again, South Korea is a very unique democracy. It's very, very, you know, noisy, and there are, you know, entrenched viewpoints. In fact, there was a time that one of the South Korean president was assassinated and killed by South Korean intelligence service chief in office.
Oh,
So that was prior to democracy being prevalent in South Korea. South Korea is also a society in transition. Traditionally, it was a Buddhist country, but now it is a US ally, and more than 70% of the population has been converted into Christianity. South Korea is also highly racist country. If you see, there have been grumblings by people of Indian origin because when they go, they are considered, because of the brown skin, they are considered dirty, or people will ostracize them and ask them to go and take a bath so that the mud gets off. So there's a lot of color-based racism in South Korea. Uh, Having said that, they worked hard and they sort of, rebuilt their economy after the Korean War, being US allies. Uh, and it is an economic powerhouse, but there's a lot of corruption in South Korea. There are these big business houses that, control factional politics. And as I mentioned, that President Park Geun-hye was impeached in 2016-17 for taking bribes from Samsung conglomerate, these business houses. And just now, as I mentioned, that the First Lady, there was a motion to appoint a special counsel because of corruption charges. Apparently, she took a gift of a handbag, Christian Dior handbag, costing $2,200, whereas the law allows the government officials to take gifts only up to $750. And apparently her bank account was being managed by some wheeler dealer from some business house. So it's a very complex society, very noisy society. It's always under the threat of aggression, always under threat of nuclear war, because North Korea, the communist governed North Korea, has nuclear weapons. So whatever happens in that country is somewhat unpredictable. But I can tell you that uh, this episode, failed declaration of martial law, and then failed impeachment of the president, does not end the story. It is very likely that the current president of South Korea within next few weeks will be forced to resign by the current circumstances, because members of his own party were very upset with President Yoon Suk Yeol
Yeah.
for imposing martial law, because they felt that it will harm the national interest by driving down the economy and affecting the international relations, because nobody these days in democratic world likes martial law except for Ukraine, where there is a martial law and democracies are supporting Ukraine.
Is there any lesson for India?
I don't think so. India is a category, India is a unique category in its own. South Korea is a very small country. I mean, it's just nonsensical that anything happening in South Korea will affect India's democracy or India's Indian state. India is on a different trajectory. India is a class of its own.
So that was all the question I had for you. So we wrap up today's episode of Global Focus by Hari Prakash Sinha. A huge thank you to Dr. Adityanjee for sharing your incredible insights and helping us navigate the complexities of this poignant moment in South Korea history. Viewers, if you enjoyed this, please like the video and share the video and subscribe the channel. Don't forget to tune in next time as we uncover more stories that matter. Until then, stay curious, stay safe. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable time.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me on your Global Focus platform. And I'm happy to discuss this, and we shall see what happens in South Korea in next few days and few weeks.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Namaskar.